Welcome back to the 5th episode of the Conduct Detrimental Podcast. Today we're going to jump back into the NFL's domestic violence policy. This will be our first sort of second episode on the same topic. And instead of Josh Brown, which we covered last time, we're going to talk today about the Ezekiel Elliott case. We had some breaking news come out today, reported by our special guest. And so we'll talk with him in a minute. I'm joined today by my co-host, Dan Wallach. Dan, how are you?
I'm doing well, Dan. Thanks for, we're on episode 5, but today we break the glass ceiling. We have our first male special guest. We had Diana Moskovitz from Deadspin. We had Julia Marsh from the New York Post. And without further ado, we have a breaking news reporter from USA Today, somebody I've gotten to know very well over the past couple of months, and you might be familiar with him from his work on the Ezekiel Elliott case, the Josh Brown matter, going back last year to Greg Hardy. Warm welcome to my good friend, AJ Perez from USA Today. How are you, AJ?
I'm doing well, thanks.
Yeah, I mean, your work recently has been, you've been all over the place on some of these stories. What's going on? I mean, what is the latest with I said Josh Brown? It was just recently, but what is the latest with Ezekiel Elliott?
That kind of the Josh Brown kind of leads into Ezekiel Elliott. A lot of people were wondering this why a case that was apparently over in September when the Columbus prosecutor didn't bring charges against Elliott, why was this case still open? And we heard about the confrontation between Jerry Jones and an official front office official from the NFL, and probably a lot of fans, and I see it on Twitter, like, why are they still? I mean, they dropped the charge. I mean, there were no charges and nothing to drop. They never brought them. Why is it still happening? Why is it still going on? So reading through the documents from Columbus and studying them, we and editors and Tom Pelissero, we looked at. I'm like, well, there could be something out there. Let's just go ahead and put some open records requests in. And I have a pretty big background on that, going back to Balco, way back when, almost 8 years ago, dealing with that, 9 years ago. So last week I put in a bunch of requests in to we knew he was training around Weston, Florida. So I was like, well, I'm going to hit up and there's so many jurisdictions. It's a pretty well-populated area, so it's a lot of overlapping jurisdictions, and so it's basically just flooding them with open records requests, and we got one back.
Well, I live down here. I mean, I live in South Florida. You eventually struck pay dirt with the city of Aventura, but how many different public records requests did you have to file with all the various municipalities? I mean, we have Dade County, Broward County, and dozens, if not more.
Dade County Sheriff, Broward Sheriff, Fort Lauderdale, Weston. Weston's actually is patrolled by the sheriff. So there's a lot of it was probably at least a dozen that we filed, and a lot of them didn't get back to us on Monday till like earlier this week, and we already had the story up. So we just kind of it was probably Aventura, which, looking back at the text messages that were in the open records request, that should have been where I started, because that city was mentioned in the no reference to anything that happened there, but just that city was mentioned. So I should have started there. Aventura was probably my 10th, 11th request that I put in.
Don't be so hard on yourself. You actually broke the story. You broke 2 stories. What was the first story you broke? And then you broke one on Thursday. Today, we're broadcasting today in the second day of the era of President-elect Trump. But you actually broke 2 different stories. And can you describe what you found out last week and then what you found out today?
Last week, we found out that there was a second incident, which we knew about the one in July in Columbus right before training camp. And we found one. We found one last week, Friday, is when we heard back from Aventura that there was an incident. It was a 3-page report. No charges were filed, but the accuser, who we don't name accusers at USA Today, or alleged victims of domestic violence. We found that she called police, and the police came to his apartment in Aventura, and after she said that she was shoved and pushed by and by Mr. Elliott. So that's what we found out then, and we follow up to Dade County prosecutors even though the police didn't arrest him at the time, she'd be able to go and pursue the case herself, and she did not do that in this instance. She did in Columbus, and Thursday we found out that the NFL, which we've known for a couple of days, but the NFL, we were just kind of vetting it and everything else. The NFL put a request in well before I did. They put the request in late September for the same information that we published last week about the incident.
Got it. So the NFL has been sitting on this information essentially. I think it was since the end of September. Is that right?
Yes, September 28th is when the email sent. We don't have the return. I'm sure they processed mine so fast. I think it was probably the same day or maybe a day or two after they had it. So they were, that's one thing good about Florida. And once you find the information, as long as it doesn't deal with an autopsy, you usually get it back pretty quickly. I know it's with the Fernandez, which I also covered, the unfortunate death of the Marlins pitcher. You run up against that. That's the hardest thing for us to get our medical examiner reports usually.
So what's the NFL NFL's investigation's pending now? I mean, do we have comment from them? Do we know where we're at with that side of the story?
Yeah, they're still saying it's open. It's still open. They haven't really changed. They haven't changed their stance ever since when this first happened. Several months or started at preseason base or training camp is when we kind of the investigation kind of began into the regular season. There's we also have as a reporter I also have a lot of other open records requests, but out there we'll see if there's anything else out there, but so these are the two that we know about now.
Yeah, AJ, have you tried contacting the girlfriend? And she's described in various reports as not just a girlfriend, but
the 911 call that we got. Yeah, we have. Yeah, in a lot of some news organizations, some blogs, unfortunately, have put her name out there.
No, but have you spoken with her?
Yeah, no, we have. We've reached out to her. That's all I can say. So we have done that. It's kind of we don't, with a victim of domestic violence, we're not going to bombard her cell phone every day, but we have been trying to get in touch with her. And I've also tried other means to get a hold of if she has a lawyer. And so far I can't find that she has one, a civil lawyer in this case.
Got it. So, this kind of strikes me as an interesting case on the heels of the Josh Brown investigation, where the NFL seems to have screwed up yet again, and we had Diana Moskovitz of Deadspin come on and point out the 7 to 10 ways that the NFL botched that investigation, including the suspension.
Yeah. And it was like, and I think you pointed it out on Twitter that this is what the NFL identified itself this time. The NFL was ahead of the reporters this time. In the email, the email, it was this, the person identified himself as an NFL representative, NFL security person. Saying that carries weight. And that's something that we found out in Washington State, in the sheriff's office that handled the Josh Brown investigation. Also no charges there, but the documents that came out of that, and that they couldn't have gotten them any sooner than we would have as journalists, but the NFL, the shield carries weight, and the sheriff basically said if they had known, that the NFL was contacting it rather than some guy with basically just a consumer email account, that they could have briefed him, and the NFL may have exchanged information. We're going to suspend him for this amount of time. What do you think? And they, without breaking any open records.
Yeah.
At least their policy, they could have gotten more information out than, they got at the same time we did as reporters. And that's not, for as many of the former FBI people and police officers that they employ, it's kind of not expected. And they even had a detective from Seattle reach out to them. And it carries more weight when who was kind of freelancing for the NFL. But it carries more weight if you're an investigator for the NFL. You don't have subpoena power. You don't have any more powers than journalists, but you can get it some information maybe that we can't off the record on background that takes us longer to get to.
AJ, have you been denied any information from the city of Aventura or from any of the law enforcement agencies?
No.
No.
This has been Florida. Like I said, it's a pretty good state to for open records, and they turned over the CD, which you know about, to us, and FedExed it, and it's not. It's a lot of the time it's frustrating. You're going to put in I probably have FOIA requests in and open records requests in. Months back that one of these days will pop in my inbox or it'll be delivered to my house. I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot about that one. But yeah, this one's pretty straightforward. It's not open investigation, which is when it's open, it's almost impossible to get information out of it. But when it's closed and there was nothing and there's it's just a basic incident report. Those are usually easy to get to. Unfortunately, the records they kept the 911 call, which we had access to as well.
So here we are today. What do we know about Ezekiel Elliott? We've learned that he's been involved with multiple incidents of, pushing, shoving, and we've seen the bruises of his ex-girlfriend on Deadspin. Where does the NFL go from here? I mean, they have a real delicate situation, not just in how to handle a suspension of any player, but we're talking about a star player deep into the regular season and
top rushes the NFL. And probably.
And African-American players are watching. They're seeing Josh Brown get a game, and they're wondering, well, what's going to happen now? So if the NFL suspends him for, multiple games, how does something like that play out? I think the league is in a real difficult situation here. Yeah. Where do they go?
It's different from Josh Brown in this instance is that, you don't have it's different in several ways. One is that it looks like from today's story that we reported, it looks like, at least from the letter that the NFL, the information that they requested in September, that they have her cooperation. So that's something that they didn't have in the Josh Brown case. Molly Brown refused to cooperate with the investigation by police until the very last minute. By that time, with cases closed, and she didn't cooperate at all with the NFL. There was ways around the NFL. They could have gotten through divorce documents and other things, but I think it appears that she's cooperating, according to the letter that we put out there today on Thursday. So that's one thing, but you don't have the volume. There was volumes. There was the Josh Brown report was, probably with all the reports had to be close to 100 pages, and a lot of that stuff was emails from him to friends and everything else. There's not the paper trail in this case. We have two known incidents, neither of which were one was it wasn't even, the one in Florida wasn't even passed on to prosecutors. The one that was in Washington State was not. They chose not to charge, and just because without the cooperation. And so those are two things where it's like, I know these are two incidents, but seemed with Josh Brown there was a pattern, and that's why he's no longer in the NFL. I think that was, the Giants at first were pretty reluctant to do, outside of keeping him home that one game, and it looked like they had his back, but it just the situation got so untenable that, he led to his basically release.
Yeah, I see some similarities between the two cases, not necessarily.
Not really. Sorry, I forgot. The put it on the commissioner's list. Sorry, I can't say release. So,
Right.
But yeah.
Right, got it. Correction made.
Go ahead. Sorry.
That's all right. So, some of the reactions or some of the similarities between the two cases to me are really like sort of how the team is reacting. And we saw John Mara's comments in the Giants case kind of blow back in his face. And here again, I wrote down a couple of quotes from Jerry Jones saying that he knows everything. He's very comfortable that he has the full story. Stephen Jones said that.
And he may, and I'm sure he was. We know that Elliott was interviewed, and by the time he was interviewed in October, the NFL had this information. Unless got lost in email or something, the NFL had this information. So they entered the interview knowing about this Florida incident. It appears. So they did have that, going into their interview with Mr. Elliott.
Right. Yeah, and even so, though, I mean, is there the possibility, at least, that these comments are going to come back to bite him? You know, if we find out more of the victim's story here when she was interviewed by the NFL, as opposed to, you know, just his side of the story with these sort of minimalistic police reports that are out there, because as you mentioned, this is different from the Josh Brown case, as she's going to be interviewed by the NFL as well. So, I mean, is there a chance that this backfires in the Cowboys' face?
Yeah, there was tone deafness that a lot of people thought in Mayer going on the radio saying, we didn't know it was this bad or it was this much, whatever the quote was. That you can't, domestic violence is domestic violence. And, especially with Josh Brown, this is after everything came out, where, maybe, even if Josh Brown didn't give you a whole truth, if he said that he's being sought treatment for a problem and so you knew something was there, we don't, outside these two incidents, and he's young, Josh Brown's closer to my age than I am to Ezekiel Elliott's. There's more of a paper trail in this, it's in the Josh Brown case. So that, I think that's, there are still a lot of unknowns. If this was two incidents and they're, depending on who you talk to, it's girlfriend or something more casual. But it's all we know now is about, like you said, these are two reports that even though the one, including the first report in Columbus where there was conflicting witness statements, were saying that he had witnesses saying that this didn't happen, and here we just have basically the cop said in the report from Florida said that it was he said she said, and there's no obvious physical injuries. So that's one of the reasons why that's basically why they didn't arrest him at that point. But there's other incidents out there. I have no idea. But so it's the NFL's in a tough place because it's one game for Josh Brown. It was a personal conduct policy violation, not a domestic violence, which is an automatic 6-game violation. So now it's like you send him 6 games at this point. It's pretty much puts him out until the last week or two of the season. And if this waits until the Cowboys look like a playoff team, the best record in the NFC. If they wait a few more weeks, you're going to talk about losing postseason games, and we should care. It doesn't matter if they get it right, they get it right. But a lot of the Cowboys fans see this as like, what, he was never arrested. Why suspend him? And the NFL doesn't have to follow that. It has a lower burden. It can basically under the CBA, it can impose its will as far as this kind of policy goes on, as it wants. So, if this is in a vacuum, I'm not sure, if I'm not Ezekiel Elliott without the Josh Brown case and the Ray Rice case, if this I'm not sure would be viewed a lot differently.
Yeah, but right now we have, we're not just talking about one incident here. We're talking about multiple incidents. The woman, showed bruises or had photographs of bruises that were published on Deadspin. I mean, can the NFL really kind of push or run this out, basically go into a four corners offense and push it into the offseason? I mean, they've been investigating both incidents for a series of months. I don't know if they can really sit on it any longer. What else can the NFL be waiting for? What other shoe is there to drop?
I'm not sure. And that's what thing it's like, the NFL's taking its time on this one. And they kind of made the decision a lot of people felt on Josh Brown too soon before the big release of the documents. And if they waited about 3 more weeks, I think about a month after the suspension is when the documents dropped. And by that time you got like 1 game suspension. If you had gotten a 6-game suspension, would he still be with the Giants? I'm not sure. But he's on the commissioner's list, and these things, it's like kind of there's a PR component. There's to this because it's people felt that they mishandled Ray Rice. They announced a suspension, then the video comes out, and we saw it's one thing to see on a police report, another thing to see it like in black. Well, it's black and white in this case. I guess it was a surveillance video for Ray Rice. It's nothing to see it. It could have been in color or really any color. But so that changed that case. So I don't know. we're following up on that. That's the times we're in right now.
Yeah, is there anything on the 911 call that strikes you as a possible problem for Elliot in terms of public perception? Is it going to get worse for him, or is the 911 call a short call or basically a non-event?
Yeah, it was about a 14-minute call, and it pretty much just repeated what was in. There was more. She did allege, like we have in the story today, that she did allege that he had assaulted her a couple months prior. Another shove or a push that it was similar to what happened in February in Florida, according to her. So that's and she didn't go to police at that point. So that this was basically would have been his final year at Ohio State. Like, we don't know where this happened. It wasn't reported to police. So we don't have it doesn't seem like there's there's anything to other than her word is. There's no paper trail for that if that occurred.
And during the course of your investigation, you must have been wondering to yourself, geez, there are quite a few going on here in July and September. Did you try to maybe take a broader, longer range view going back a couple of years, or were you only focused on the matter at hand?
Well, you focus on what you have at first, but yeah, I can't go into where we're going next, but we. Pretty much everything that we're able to report has been reported so far, and we're still digging. So,
AJ, can you talk a little bit more about the Columbus incident specifically? You mentioned that there were these witnesses. Do we know who these witnesses were, how they relate to Elliot, and how they fit into that whole picture?
Yeah, there were a lot of texts between Elliot and the alleged victim. There were witnesses, Ezekiel Elliott's friends, who gave affidavits that conflicted with what the alleged victim told police. So that was basically it. And there was also a fight that occurred between that where she may have suffered these injuries that were, she may have suffered them outside of a bar or restaurant. But yeah, so there was that case there were two versions given, not by the alleged victim, but there were two versions, what Elliot and his friends said and what she said.
Got it. So there was actually a separate fight. Is that what you're saying? This wasn't a fight with Elliot?
Yeah,
right?
it was it was separate. It was a separate one, and that was also that was also in the police documents. It was alleged, but there's no. But it's kind of hard in these cases where these have so many, and you don't. And these witnesses, a lot of them are friends of Elliot, so it's kind of you have to. They could be totally accurate, and you have to take them at face value. But there's. So that's
absolutely. I mean, there's so much going into these. And
yeah.
That and if there was no other evidence, they may have not brought charges. It doesn't necessarily mean it didn't happen.
Exactly. Mean, we all, if you're lawyers, that just because there's not charges brought doesn't mean you're guilty. And even if you're guilty, you have to be proven it in a court of law, and it's a burden of proof. And we haven't even, there's not that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, go ahead, Dan.
No, AJ, this starts to, bear many of the hallmarks of, some of the other, domestic violence and sexual violence cases. Even though this wasn't sexual violence, we're talking about someone who's not exactly a close girlfriend or spouse, somebody who's more of a casual friend. And I've read some of the reports that describe her as a friend with benefits.
Yes.
I'm beginning to, expect the other shoe to drop in the form of a civil lawsuit. Have you learned of any civil litigation?
No, not yet. And I've been calling around a lot of the people who do those cases in Columbus, and then the lawyers I've talked to and the ones who've gotten back to me haven't heard anything. And searching court documents in around that area, I don't see anything filed.
How about Florida? Have you checked Miami-Dade County?
They don't. No, yeah, I have. But yeah, I've browsed and I've checked those documents, and but there's nothing, or the dockets there, and I don't see anything. I think they were both Ohio residents. Even though he's from Missouri originally, I think that it would most likely be filed there. So that's where kind of that's where the civil case. But and we don't, as USA Today's policies, we don't report about alleged lawsuits. We have to wait till they're filed. That's where, even if we may get some information from a lawyer saying, yeah, we're going to file a certain day. I'm like, well, that's great until it hits the court website. We can't report on it anyway. So.
Right, and they're well within the statute of limitations still on both
exactly.
counts. So that may be something that's coming. One thing that I wanted to talk about that we just kind of brushed on earlier was this confrontation between Jerry Jones and NFL investigator, domestic violence expert Lisa Friel. Can you explain to us what happened there, and what do you make of that?
It was I think it was at Cowboys. Was it AT&T Stadium? I'll have to look back at my notes here.
Yeah, I'm not sure either.
Yeah, so it was this. I think it was a witness that Jerry Jones had got in an argument with Friel. So that's basically what it was. We don't know what how deep the conversation was or what the reaction to it was, but as far as what it means to Elliott, I'm not sure.
Got it. Yeah, I've read a few different reports on it. One of them said that he told her that your quote unquote your bread and butter is going to get both of us thrown on the street. Which isn't a great look. But there was also other witnesses there, I guess, that said it didn't come across as hostile like that. But again, it's sort of looking at which witness you're going to follow. So it was a report from ESPN magazine. Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's troubling in the sense that Jerry Jones appears to be trying to put his thumb on the scale of justice, and he's interfering, or at least
and that's not a good look, because that's it's supposed to be independent, it's supposed to be done, meticulously and without influence of the teams, and that's not.
We're talking about independence. We have a Dallas Cowboys owner accosting or trying to interfere with an NFL investigator who's a lifelong Giants fan, and here we have a reporter based in Washington Redskins country. Can we? So
yeah. I grew up a Rams fan, and then they moved from LA to St. Louis. Now they're back, but so I really don't have a team. So as far as the NFL goes, I'm really have no allegiances.
Yeah, but this all does kind of go back to the identity of owners and all the disciplinary power vested in an owner or commissioner appointed by owners with whom he has varying degrees of close or distant relationships. Yeah. You're seeing,
and Jerry Jones is probably, outside of the mayor, is maybe even more powerful now than he's probably arguably the one most 2 or 3 top the most powerful owners in the NFL.
Yeah, and unfortunately, this sounds like the discipline that's meted out is going to bear some relationship to what's the relationship between the league and the owner, what's good for business. There seem to be all these collateral and external considerations that might be coming into play, given his star power, the duration the point, the time in the season where this is occurring, right before the playoff push. He's a top leader in jersey sales. I mean, this raises a whole host of selective enforcement and consistency issues with discipline. What do you think would be the ideal way of handling something like this, where you have an uncharged allegation that hasn't been proven in court with a player who did all this stuff before he even became an NFL player?
Yeah, that's another thing. It's like, how do you this all happened after Ohio State. He was not, he even, I think the documents, he was listed as unemployed, which he was. He wasn't drafted until a couple months later. So, and he's been the contract and everything else. So this incident happened. You're right. So do they take it into account? And do they, obviously the July one? Yeah. It was, he was basically an employee, a contract. He had a contract with the Dallas Cowboys. So how do you handle that? And that's another thing. It's like, he was, this one in February happened before he was with the Cowboys. So why the angle. How do you punish somebody who wasn't even part of the team?
Right. And I think we've seen that Goodell do that before with another Ohio State player. Was it Terrell Pryor with the tattoo thing that he basically preemptively suspended him?
And you can you can test positive at the combine, and there's consequences for that too. So there is precedent of taking your conduct before you become an NFL player officially, and getting punished.
All right, AJ, I know you've got to run shortly, but I want to leave you with a final question. I mean, this is still a fluid situation, and Dan will have final question too. We'll give you two final questions. Where do you see this ending up this year? Do you see a suspension? And if so, do you see a suspension this year? If so, what is the duration of the suspension? Or does this just get punted into the off season?
I have no idea with this case. I mean, the interview took place last month in October. They've had information since late September for everything that we know about. There may be other stuff out there that they're still looking into, which I guess you have to give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe there's some other stuff they're looking into right now. That's why it's still open. But you run up against the thing where this after Ray Rice, they created a 6-game ban for an NFL player who was even proved, it's not even convicted, but something alleged and likely have happened. They can give him a 6-game suspension. And that's you kind of paint yourself into a corner. It was a good thing from a PR standpoint, but this is 6 games, and it's 6 games or outside of Josh Brown, when he saw he got 1 game, but under a different policy, but it's 6 games or nothing, or 6 games or more, really, at least 6 games. So that's what we have to do. It's a tough position to be in. So I'm not sure what's going to happen. It could be pushed back into the postseason, in the off season. I don't know if the investigation is still ongoing and they're having. I don't think they're gonna. I think most people think that if it's going to go that long, there's a reason for it, and we don't know if they're. I don't think it's going to be a PR move or a competitive advantage move to do so.
Yeah. I think it's going to be whitewashed. I don't see any possibility that the suspension will come out in the latter part of the NFL season. The league can create all these different justifications for why it's taking so long. They're in control of their own investigation. They can just simply extend the investigation, suspend them, during training camp, the beginning of next season. They're not going to do it now with the Cowboys near the top of the league, playing well, the rookie duo. I think they're going to bury this for the time being until it's convenient and good for business for the league to do something about it and maybe mete out a 1-game, 2-game suspension. I just don't see it happening this season.
Yeah, and we've seen that before, and we've seen 3 suspensions now under this new policy. None of them have actually met the 6-game standard. Obviously there's mitigating circumstances built into the policy, although cases like Josh Brown really question whether those mitigating circumstances were hit, but Goodell is fitting them in there somehow. So Cowboy fans are listening. There's 6 games it may be less than that, and also there's appeal options for him built into that, and a federal appeal. So even if it happens, it may not.
And we may see another lawsuit in Minnesota out of this federal lawsuit.
Exactly. I have one final question, very important. So I learned today that AJ is competing in his 3rd World's Toughest Mudder competition this weekend, and my question is, what is the most difficult obstacle? Or the worst obstacle, I would say.
Probably the one I put on Twitter. They change it up every year. This year may be even tougher. It's when you basically swing and you swing off a trapeze and from about 30 feet up above water, and you try to hit a bell, and you can't use your feet anymore. And they're going to make that one tougher this year. I just don't have the coordination for that one, but that's one of the tougher ones. And they always have an electroshock one.
Yeah, I've heard
I really
about that
dislike
one.
Those. Last year was you had to fit a pipe through a hole that's electrified, a steel pipe, and if you hit the side of the hole, you get, because your feet are in water, of course. Yeah, you get shocked. So I don't like the electroshock ones very much. But the ones for strength and that's okay. But it's the coordination ones I can I can usually do okay at. But yeah, I don't like electroshock.
Well, good luck. That sounds
all right. Thanks.
Crazy. And we appreciate you coming on the call, and thanks again. Keep up the great work.
Thank you, AJ. It was a pleasure to speak to you as always. And you'll want to follow AJ on Twitter at @AJ_Perez. He's been doing a lot of great work lately, breaking stories on the Ezekiel Elliott case and so much more. And I know he's going to have a few more good pieces coming up. So I would definitely stay on his Twitter account and check him out. And good luck this weekend.
All right. Appreciate it.